Hi guys, this is Beginner Music Theory, lesson number 8, and we're going to talk about odd meter today. And this is actually going to be our last lesson for the beginner theory level, as you will see the major scale is next, and that's covered in intermediate. So you can, if you've been following the beginner music theory, you can just pick up the first lesson of intermediate level and you can continue your progress. So let's talk about odd meters. So in the previous lesson, we talked about how different time signatures group into different meters. Simple, which is subdivisions of 2, and compound subdivisions of 3. And then the number of beats per bar. Duple was 2, triple was 3 beats, and quadruple was 4. So today we're going to talk about odd meters, which are like more complex time signatures, more complex combinations of feel. So let's go to musictheory.net and let's click on the lesson of odd meter. So an odd meter is a meter which contains, has both a simple and compound beats. Remember, simple is subdivision of 2 and compound is subdivision of 3. So let's talk about the first example of this, which is 5/8. 5/8 is a pretty common time signature. You'll see it a lot in music. If you've never seen it before, this is going to be a great introduction to it. This is going to make a lot of sense, especially after having seen the meter lesson from before. So a 5/8 time signature is 8th note and then 5/8 notes. Now, this time signature is not going to be 5/8 note beats. How this is going to work is that we're going to group these 8th notes into different simple and compound groupings. So in this first case over here, you're going to see that we're going to first have 2 8th notes as a group, which is a quarter note. This is a simple beat or a simple grouping, two subdivision. And we're going to have one group of 3/8 notes, which makes up a dotted quarter note beat. So this is going to be a compound beat, compound, like 3 subdivision. So in this case, we have a simple and a compound. We could also group this as a group of 3 first and then a group of 2. So we end up with a compound beat and a simple beat after that. If I were to sing this, I'm gonna do it with subdivision this time first, so you hear what it sounds like, and then I'll do it without subdivision, and you'll see why I'm doing it in this order this time. So the first measure would be 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and. So I'm clapping 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's my beat, and the subdivision is 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. I think, sorry, before I did 1 and 1 and that's wrong. Is 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So 2 beats of different combination of simple and compound. Now, if we do the one on the right, we're gonna end up with 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Without subdivision is 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. You see? So these are odd time signatures and odd meters. But these do show up in music, and it just gives us a different feel, different rhythmic feel to group notes in, which can be really cool and interesting if used in different pieces. So you will see these odd meters, or like odd time signatures and odd meters. So let's talk about odd meters with 3 beats this time. The previous odd meter had 2 beats, but now let's talk about 7/8. So 7/8 is 7/8 notes, but instead of having 7/8 note beats, we're going to group these into different combinations to make 3 beats. And this is going to be a combination of simple beats and compound beats. In this first example, we're going to have the first beat is going to be a simple beat. The second beat is going to be another simple beat. And these are 2 quarter note beats subdivided into 2 eighth notes. And the third beat of this bar is a dotted quarter note, which is a compound subdivision of 3 eighth notes. Okay? We can group it differently. We can have our compound beat be the first one in the bar, and then 2 simple beats after. Both of these groupings are actually really common in music, and this is really kind of up to the composer, how they like each measure or each beat to feel. But both of these show up a lot. And I also want to point something. I want you guys to notice that in this case, the eighth notes, the flags are being connected, and they're being connected to form the actual beat grouping. So in this case, in the simple beat, we have 2 eighth notes connected. Another simple beat, we have 2 eighth notes connected. But then for the compound beat, we have 3 eighth notes connected. The flags are connecting the beams into a single grouping. And in music notation, you're often going to see notes, especially like notes with flags specifically. If the note doesn't have a flag, you cannot connect them. But if the notes have flags, they're going to be connected to make groupings that reflect the beat that the time signature is in. And the beat is tied with the meter. Especially these odd meters can have different beat groupings like you see here. So you just take note of that. How the flags are connected gives us a pretty clear indication of how they're grouped together when it comes to meter. So in this case, if I were to sing the feel of this, 7/8 in the example on the left would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So I was clapping the beats and singing the subdivision, but also the numbers referred to the actual beats, like 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. The measure on the right is going to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. Okay, so you see different fields for the 7/8 time signature are going to change that meter, which basically just how we reorder that compound beat in this group. You can also see it like this. This grouping is less common. I haven't seen it as much in music, but it's certainly possible to have 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. But it is a possibility, so just watch out for that. The next thing we're going to talk about is 8/8. So 8/8 is 8 eighth notes, but don't be confused with 4/4, because if you do the math, 8 eighth notes, it's also 4 quarter notes, which is 4/4. But remember that in 4/4, we have, it's a simple quadruple, means 4 beats, and each one of those beats is going to be broken up into 2. But you see that we're not breaking this up into 4 pairs of eighth notes. We're actually grouping them very differently. We're making 2 groups of 3 and then a group of 2. We use 8/8 precisely because we don't want to have this same feel in 8/8. We want a way to represent, we want a way to write a different rhythmic feel than 4/4, even though this adds up to the same amount of notes. This is the same amount of time, but it's broken up differently, so it's going to have a different rhythmic feel. And this is why the idea of meter is important, because it's not just about how much time you can fit in a measure. That's only useful when it comes to writing music. But when you're performing music, when you're singing, when you're playing music, the feel or the meter is more important because it's going to change the rhythmic feel of the music. So just take note of that. So 8/8 is not 4/4. It's not going to be broken up in that same way. So, and you can see up here that 8/8 is one compound beat. The second beat is another compound beat. And then the third beat is a simple beat. So if I were to sing this, it would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2, 1 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. Now 4/4 would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Let me do them back to back so you see how like each bar is actually going to take the same amount of time, but the feel or the accents, the attacks are going to be very different. So I'm going to kind of do them in a loop now so you hear what I mean. I'm going to start from here and I'm just going to read this through, and then I'm going to come back to the beginning and do it a second time so you see what it's like. So 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you see, same amount of time each bar, but the feel was different and the beat was different to make these groupings of 3, which is just a different way that we can combine the same number of notes. So that's why we use 8/8. We use 8/8 with this odd meter or odd groupings, combinations between simple and compound meter. Okay, we're gonna talk about two more odd meters that have 4 beats in total: 10/8 and 11/8. Let's start with 10/8. So 10/8 is going to be, in this case, in this grouping, 3/8 notes. That's the first beat, so it's a compound beat. Another 3/8 notes, another compound beat. This is beat number 2, and then beat 3 is simple. It's a simple beat, 2/8 notes, and final beat, which is this final quarter note, is 2/8 notes. So another simple meter. So this is gonna feel like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you see, in this particular combination, that's how it's gonna feel. We could change the order of the groupings. Like I could put one of these simple beats in between these two. Like I could have this beat be the second beat, and then this beat be the third beat. So then we'd have a dotted quarter as the first beat, a quarter note as the second beat, a dotted quarter as the third beat, and another quarter note as the final beat. And that would feel like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now you notice that feel is exactly the same as if we did 5/8. Because if you notice before, when we did 5, we did 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So we're usually not going to group it that way for that very reason, because that gives us the same meter, that gives us the same feel. But in this time, we would have 4 beats. So one could do that, but it's more interesting to group it like this because this grouping hasn't happened in the other time signatures, the other odd time signatures that we've looked at so far. So the last one we're going to do is 11/8. So 11/8 can be grouped like this. First beat is a dotted quarter or 3/8 notes, a compound beat. Second beat is a dotted quarter, a compound beat of 3/8 notes, another compound beat of 3/8 notes, a dotted quarter note is the third beat, and the final beat, the fourth beat, is a quarter note, which is subdivided into 2/8 notes. This is a simple beat. So this is gonna feel like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you see, this is a very odd, very kind of like interesting, unstable time signature, but it's also fun because it gives us like a different, very unique feel to the music. So these odd time signatures, these odd meters are gonna show up in music whenever we want to have something more interesting than your very stable, simple, and compound meters. When we want to combine them, we're gonna come up with these cool, different feels that are gonna make the music much more interesting, rhythmically speaking. Okay, so just go through these lessons and practice this some more. Odd meters can be a little tricky and a little confusing at first, but if you practice them, you'll get the feel for it. And just remember, the math of it, like the way that we can fill up one bar, is, while it's important, the most important thing is not just the math of it, but rather how it feels. So just practice clapping and singing this, so that you kind of like build these rhythms into your body, and you start feeling the rhythm. That's much more important. Okay, guys, I will see you guys later. Bye bye.